Brooklyn. Yeah, we do plenty of stuff together for sure. So anytime you call or suggest a program, I'm always all in. So yeah, well, we'll go ahead and jump in there. I've got several slides. I'm pretty sure I'll get to all of them as long as I don't go off on too many tangents along the way. But yeah, feel free to bring on any of the questions that you'll have. So I was asked to talk about pantry pests and really kind of indoor pest concerns. My background is in entomology, so insects are my game for sure, um, inside and out. I always kind of joke that most folks may not really pay attention to a lot of stuff, and really even me, on the outside part of it, and until something gets on the inside of your house and is now in your way or uh, maybe interrupting whatever personal activity you're in the middle of, and now you got to act. So I always use the analogy of the ladybugs. Everybody, they're kind of the poster child for the cute little insects and things like that. But as soon as there's a horde of them in the corner of your living room, now it's a problem, and now we want to get rid of them. So they become a bad bug all then. So it's all kind of situational on what you run across, but we'll focus on some of the more common ones that folks see inside the home. And I'll reference this here. All this information here was kind of compiled from Dr. Dan Suter and Lisa Ames as well in their stored product pest publication. I've got a link on there. It's not clickable or anything like that, but basically the new UGA publication portal is called Field Report. So you can go to Google or your favorite search engine, whatever, and type in UGA stored product pest or UGA field report, something like that. It should take you to that site. And then the parts in quotes here, those are just the names of the publication, stored product pest, or the publication number is B1378. But just being upfront and let everybody know that's where this information and a lot of these images and things came from that. So some of them are my own images. Some of them I've gotten from other UGA folks, or even originally from Tennessee. So even some run-ins I've had with folks in the past there, some issues they've had. So got some pretty fun to me pictures, maybe not to folks that hate creepy crawly stuff, but either way, we'll run through those. But this basically will discuss identification of a lot of the most common things we'll see when it comes to stored products. And basically stored products is essentially just things, she mentioned talking about things that you might can and things, but even store-bought stuff, processed stuff, could be raw vegetables, fruits, could be things that you never intended to eat at all. Just things that may be an organic material that may kind of open a window, so to speak, for pests to kind of set up camp in your house. So just kind of give some tips on what to look for if you're already maybe you already see this kind of stuff. Maybe you might see some signs or damage of something and be like, what in the world caused that? Maybe this will spark some light bulbs there in those categories. But it's a 16-page publication, not too long, good concise information. Then it gives some details on what to do as well. I always like to throw this slide in here. I reference it all the time, and there's so many more things, but I just kind of cut it down to some of the more popular options here. But this is from the Food and Drug Administration, so the FDA. It's a few years old, but still relevant. But just some examples of how many insects or insect fragments are allowed per each one of these products that you may commonly find. So, and it says 100 grams or approximately about a half a cup of that product. So, like talking about frozen broccoli, for every half a cup of that, there's 60 insects that are allowed to be in half a cup of frozen broccoli. Doesn't mean that there are 60 in there, but that is the FDA allowable maximum amount there. And then the little, like you go down to cinnamon and it talks about 800 parts. That's what that little icon there means. So just little parts and pieces of foreign things, but in this case, we'll reference that as insect parts. There's nobody kind of discerning that, but they do their quality control. They're held to a standard of that, but that's that standard, that's that maximum level that they cannot exceed on things. So pretty wild. I know chocolate always gets people's ears perked. 90 insect parts allowed in a half a cup of chocolate. Sounds like a lot. But you can be as microscopic and minute as possible. You can't stop everything, especially in a lot of these high production things and processing things. I mean, there's always stuff. And we'll talk about some of that too, what can even get through the most stringent processes. So really the biggest key to a lot of these things, and whether or not you'll see a lot of this stuff, if something can even come in through a packaged product and hatch inside those products, it's all very rotation, expiration dates. They all matter. The expiration dates aren't like legally binding. There's nobody that really polices that. They're not even required by law to put expiration dates on products. But consumer choice years and years ago showed that people prefer to know when something's going to go bad. So all these brands print expiration dates on there, but they don't have to do that. But it's a tool that we should all be conscious of, regardless of how old or how stable or long lived a product may be. It may have a 3-year expiration date, but that doesn't mean something can't be in there. So it's just always good to be vigilant and things like that on a lot of these products. So we'll talk about that and some specifics on that. But some important considerations when we're talking about in-home pests. And again, especially from a stored product or shelf stable type of thing, pantry pest spin. The adults we're going to encounter, they're all going to be small. We're not talking about 3-inch long bugs, anything like that. It's all that's how they build up in populations. That's how they become a problem. Is they're usually so small that we don't really notice them. Most of them are short-lived, but some species can be a longer-lived species, especially kind of depending on the environment. If they're in stuff that's stored in a garage or an attic versus something that's under the kitchen sink or again in a pantry or in a closet, as long as they've got enough moisture and humidity and a food source, they can persist for a while and can even build up populations. So most of these are attracted to light. It's not always foolproof, but the biggest caveat I tell folks with that is if you don't want stuff coming in your house, it's safe to assume that a lot of our insects, especially nocturnal ones, are attracted to light. So if you leave your lights on outside your house, or your house is covered in floodlights and illuminated for all to see, thinking of Christmas time even now, where everybody even decks out their roofs and siding and driveways and everything else, all that light can attract pests that may not normally be attracted to your front door. But now with all the lights and things, and again, there's different arrays and spectrums you can get. There are bug lights that are different shades and different colors, and they do work. They don't necessarily deter everything, but there are just be conscious that if you have a lot of light activity, especially around entrances, window ways, anything where there could be cracks and crevices for little stuff to get through, it more than likely is going to help lure those in. So, and again, the last thing really is a lot of these will, when they're adults, they're able to disperse easily because a lot of them will have wings. They can fly around, and again, most of them they're going to be so small you may not even notice it. But if you may notice, a little gathering over here, and then well, oh my gosh, they're over here, and now they're over here. Now they're upstairs. They get around really easily. They could be transported by moving stuff around the house. Again, thinking of moving stuff from a basement up to that. Again, perfect time of year, right? In the cool season or in the holiday season when we're unpacking all those Christmas lights or extension cords or whatever stuff, decorations that we haven't opened the box, in a year. And here we go. No telling what's been thriving in there since the last time we cracked that lid open. Hopefully, if it even had a lid to begin with, it could have just been an open container. So, but again, just remembering that the adult stages are going to be the mobile stages versus the larval stage or the immature stage. Larvae and nymphs, larvae being, caterpillars and things like that, fly larvae, stuff like that, versus the nymphs that could be like stink bugs and other stuff. Stink bugs aren't really a stored product pest. It's usually more beetles and moths that we see a lot more getting into those dried products or shelf stable products. They're supposed to have a long life there too. But remember, they can get in on fresh stuff as well. So it's not all just all these things that again that are could be produced and again may have a long shelf life, but it's crucial that we rotate that stuff out. So I know when I was in the restaurant world, it was first in, first out, the FIFO method. So you always want to rotate. You go out, maybe you get a great deal, a BOGO deal on something at the grocery store, or maybe you just got an excess amount of stuff that you've been able to produce or dry, or a lot of folks will do dry herbs, growing vegetables, things like that, and whatever. So if you have a flush of that, you just want to make sure you're rotating it through. It seems intuitive, or kind of commonsensical, but it's real easy in a hurry to just pile stuff up in front of the stuff you already had, and then lo and behold, months later, or maybe even a year later, depending on how often you crack open that bag of whole wheat flour, or the brown sugar container or the box of popcorn kernels, that kind of stuff. If it's been up there for a long time, odds are something has probably found it. Because the more undisturbed something is, the greater chance that a lot of these pests will get in there. That disturbance, that lack of disturbance, that lack of moving it around or rotating it around, just allows them to kind of sit and build up numbers and things like that. And then that's when we start seeing bugs. So all that stuff that was on that list that we just saw, I mean, the pantry is a prime space to find it all. So you've got a whole mix of things. We see raisins, we got grits and oatmeal, pastas, sugar, peanut butter, all kinds of stuff. So you can have a wide range in a pantry of, you can have canned things as well in there, which are more protected in that sense. But the biggest thing I tell folks is we have a lot of, even myself, we've got a lot of open containers, open boxes, open bags. Even if it is in like a Tupperware or OXO container, whatever kind of fanciness we put on there, if we don't secure that correctly, if there's a gap, or even if we've had that stuff for a long time and maybe it doesn't seal as good as it used to, it doesn't take much space for a lot of these tiny little critters to find their way in. And then once they're in there and they're out of sight, they've got all the food they need. They're in a nice warm house. Depending on, if it's in a different part of the house or even if it's stored outside sometimes, humidity can play a role in that. So all those things influence the insect development and how easy they're able to move around and find new sources and spread around as well and produce more offspring. That's why insects are so successful and so numerous. They can have babies like crazy. So we mentioned some of the common sources, but the ones that even I've seen as well, bird seed, dog and cat food it's almost like a miracle food source for these things. And I can think of 13 different ways that I've stored pet food, whether it's been in containers or metal trash cans or leave it in the bag all rolled up with a chip clip or something. I can think of a million different ways. I've probably never done it the same way twice. As the years have gone on, as I've moved different methods of doing it or different places I've lived, even and depending on the space, and do I keep it in the garage? Do I keep it in the pantry? Do I set it next to the dog bowl? All that kind of thing. And again, going back to if any of this stuff isn't closed off or isn't sealed, to try to keep that introduction or keep those little pest species out of it, then it's just a matter of time. Now, if it's something, again, that's where I usually caution folks. Buying in bulk is great, but if you can't use that bulk in a timely fashion, you might want to think twice about buying so much of it. Maybe you got a great buy one get one deal, whatever. But if it's cake mixes and you only make a cake twice a year, but I got 18 boxes of cake mix, I got a great deal. Well, 6 years from now, when you get to that last box of cakes mix, it may have holes in it. It may be half empty, and you may have a whole bunch of little critters running around that one way or another found their way to it, or in some cases may have already been in it when it was packaged, even that have developed and hatched inside those boxes and eaten their way out and into another thing. So that does happen. That is possible. Yeah, we'll talk about more specific on some of the little pests we might see that are capable of doing that. But cereals, cake mixes, flour. Again, in another lifetime back in the restaurant days, I worked in a couple different pizzeria places, and flour that built up inside. At one place we had a machine that would press out the dough for pizzas, and we had to basically that flour we would put on the dough balls to keep it from binding up in the rollers and things like that. Just like if you were using a rolling pin at home, but having these mechanical machines, we'd have to put flour in there. If you didn't do your due diligence, if somebody didn't follow their cleaning duties that we're supposed to do on a weekly basis, if that went unchecked for weeks and weeks and weeks, eventually, whenever that lucky person would open that machine to clear out the mess or clear out the excess flour that would fall through it, we would see little beetles, little weevils running around. You could see their little tracks in the flour. Now, it wasn't in there contacting food and stuff, but still, you don't want insects inside your restaurant equipment. But that's when people get health inspected and things like that. Those are components they check. That may have been the case. That may have been an instance where maybe that's how they found out about and that's how I learned that insects can live inside these bags of flour. if they sit unused, or if you leave a mess too long, for sure. But dried fruits and nuts as well, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the beans and peas and things like that too. Those are very common sources. Some unusual sources that we see that draw in indoor pests for sure. Chocolate, you got your sweet. It's plant based. The cocoa is plant based as well. Tobacco, very much so. So people that buy cartons of cigarettes, or even have humidors for cigars and things like that. If that stuff isn't sealed up right, or you have open packs that sit for days, and maybe somebody loses even cigarettes and things, like even cigarette butts from ashtrays that sit around and clutter or whatnot, or maybe get dropped somewhere, whatever. Those things can attract tobacco. It's funny because to me, because tobacco is the nicotine that's in tobacco is a common pesticide chemical. Basically, the nicotine, high concentrations of it can be used to treat for infestations of stuff. But the tobacco leaves themselves, just that dried out product, very much can attract different species of insects that love that kind of stuff. Peppers, any kind of dried herbs, things like that will also attract, again, a little more unusual. Peppers, again, another one, the capsaicin that's in peppers, that's what makes them hot and spicy. The more capsaicin, the hotter the pepper is. But capsaicin is used as an insect repellent or also an insect treatment. But dried, there are insects that will absolutely eat that and can thrive on it as well. So dead insects, cockroaches are a poster child for that. Everybody loves when they get roaches in their house, right? They're can be difficult to get rid of depending on how many there are. Basically, it's just a kind of a time-consuming process, but we use a lot of baits and things like that to treat for roaches. That's probably the best way to go about it instead of spraying things. I'm sure we've all been there and sprayed the roach and watched it kind of laugh and run off. It ultimately will die, but initially you don't get that satisfaction if I sprayed this thing and it died. But we recommend baits as well, especially in indoor situations. You don't want to spray a lot of chemicals. You don't want to breathe that stuff in. Just taking a chance of contaminating something, even if it's not you, it can get on food surfaces, it can get in pet food, things like that. So baits are ideal for a lot of the, especially ants and cockroaches for sure. And there's many different kinds. We can talk about those a little later. But when those insects die, if a roach dies, the other roaches, they're kind of nature's janitor is what I call them, and they'll come behind and they will eat that dead insect. So baits work really well because they eat that insect, and then that bait chemical is still active, so it can kill more roaches after the dead one has been consumed by its buddies, if you want to think of it that way. Um, but yes, so dead insects can also be a harborage or a food source for other pests as well. And rat bait. I haven't seen this one myself, but the components that make up rodent bait, so your rodenticides and things like that. I've got the Tomcat one listed on here. That's just the one that I've used before for stuff. The little green bricks. There's grains and other emulsifiers and things like that that are in that product. Even sugars and things like that. They deliberately are made to lure in a pest, right? And then they've got that toxic chemical in there, but they've got to lure that pest in. And so it works the same way with insects. Now, if they get enough of it, if an insect eats enough of it, yes, it can kill insects depending on what active ingredients are in those too. But the point being, it can lure in pests. They may never find it, but that scent or that trace of it can lure. So throwing this stuff out and leaving it there for years is not recommended, not ideal, because it can ultimately lead to maybe you won't have any rats or mice, but you may have an infestation of other pests that may come along looking for that bait there. Some other non-consumable things. I talked about birdseed. That is easily the number one thing. It's easy to spill it. It's easy to lose track of where it's at. It's easy to not think you need to really worry about, how it's contained or whatnot. Most time people might think, oh, I don't want it to get stale. Maybe I'll put it in a container. But bigger than that is, again, ideally you're not keeping it so long that it would go bad or that it would go stale. You want to use it up. But even then, those seed mixes that make up all that bird seed, they come from all over the place. There's all kinds of different species of plant seeds that are in that. Most of the bird seed, going to some of the bigger box stores and things, it's not guaranteed to be, weed free or disease free or pest free or anything like that. So that there are brands that do certify that. maybe even heat treat or kiln or somehow treat their seeds or their plants to make sure that they're not going to introduce some kind of pest. So I also do a lot of invasive species things. So bird seed is a great way. We end up with a lot of invasive stuff because the seeds are still nutrition, but when that stuff spills out all over the ground, it can sprout things we don't want as well. But it works the same way with pests, with insects. It can bring in stuff that's looking in, especially this time of year, where a lot of the browsing is kind of lower quality stuff. We're out here throwing bird seed for the birds, but the bugs will eat that too, and they'll love to find that big old mecca of bird seed bag that you've got in a closet or in a garage and just gobble it down. And some of those seeds may just like some of the food stuff I was talking about, they may have maybe insect larvae in there. There may be eggs in those seeds. Again, that's just a lower standard of control with a lot of the bird seeds in general. So great pathway for stuff to find its way into your house. So I always recommend keeping the bird seed someplace where you're not. Don't put it in your space. The dry pet foods and treats. We talked about the Rid-X and or the rodent bait, but Rid-X talking about the septic treatments. Again, that stuff's got all kinds of yeasts and proteins and all kinds of things in that. That's a fantastic source for pests to find. Again, stuff we wouldn't necessarily eat ourselves, thinking of food products, but all these other things, tobacco products, jewelry, holiday decorations, all that. So that kind of in a nutshell. It's always a fascinating one for me. So I think of anything that's got any kind of organic material. One of my favorite things to show is kind of little Jimmy's third grade art project. Um, there absolutely can be pests inside of those dried beans. Even if there's not stuff already in there and present in those products, uh, they can at least attract it. So this stuff typically doesn't get, this will be an example of stuff we might pull out, every few years, or maybe you pull it out every year for decorations, things like that. But think of like centerpieces for like tables, if they're made out of sticks and wood or animal fibers, hair or animal hide, fur parts, things like that. Bird nests are kind of their own hazard. All together, they're kind of a special kind of difficult to work with. They usually have a lot of pathogens anyway from all the bird poop and things like that. All the droppings that are in there, they're known to have a lot of diseases that can be human health risks as well as animal. And then never mind, you can also have insects just setting up camp in there, right? There used to be a warm little bird in there or multiple birds in there. And so a lot of those parasites and pests can still be present. So I never really recommend getting a bird nest and bringing it into your house. There are ways to kind of, you could fumigate those things and stuff, but I mean, then you've got chemicals that are saturated in it too. So using a real bird nest is kind of, again, kind of its own little special bomb of problems waiting to happen. So, but just things to think about where a lot of these things we may not see a lot that a lot of these pests will love to find. This picture is great. I've never had my garage look like this, but I think it's mostly I'm pretty good at purging stuff when stuff's in my way. But I've got a couple relatives actually that I could walk into their garage, probably even into their house, and see a wall that's covered in this kind of stuff. I love the box that's just labeled material. Maybe that's fabric or who knows. But outside of the clutter itself and whether or not you'd find what you're looking for, this is a fantastic harbor for all kinds of stuff. Rodents, insects for sure. Who knows what's in what box and how often those boxes are ever moved or rotated or again, even opened, disturbed. Again, if it's not disturbed, that's a prime habitat for things to build up in population. So you can have a mouse nest be in there where you go to move the boxes and see all the little papers and fur and whatever else, all the little mouse droppings everywhere. But even more so than that, they may be in there. They may have found a food source for insects. So maybe there's some type of stored product that's out here. Again, maybe not a food that we would eat, but maybe there's those little arts and crafts thing. Maybe we've got holiday wreaths that were made with natural materials, stuff like that. So anything like that that's stored in this kind of manner where it's kind of cluttered up and it doesn't get touched, it doesn't get disturbed. Again, I can't say it enough. That's where we see a lot of these problems pop in. Another example here. Here's a closet that's got several different factors going on. So we circled the corn. That's probably the most obvious thing. That's a grain there. Now that may be for whether we're putting it out for squirrels or people keep bags of corn and things to feed the wildlife and whatnot. but it's just kind of thrown in there. There's even that one ear of corn just kind of sitting on top. It's not closed off, not sealed. There's a little container of fertilizer here to the left. Insects can eat that as well. We've got, it looks like a bag of bird seed all the way there in the back, that little green and blue package. So there's some bird seed in there. And then another one that kind of gets overlooked is vacuum cleaners. So if they've got any kind of detritus or any kind of stuff that's been vacuumed up in there and left, so whether it could be hair or pet stuff or food messes or whatever that we vacuumed up. And if that's if that bag or that canister, a lot of stuff is bagless now. If it just sits there, those things aren't, they're entry points into those, right? So those tiny little insects can find their way into that spot and they can just set up home, depending on how often that equipment's used or emptied out. So you're kind of seeing a trend here. A lot of this is sanitation and kind of some cultural practices that we could put in place, at least some storage things we could do to keep it out of the way, an entry point for pests to kind of set up. This is one here. I always kind of note the photographer's name down there, Dr. Dan Suter, one of our entomology specialists there. He actually is the author for this publication that this is based off of as well. So always kind of poking. He gave me this picture, so it's not like he doesn't know I'm using it. But he noticed some pest issues in his house, in his garage area there, and he found, that's his foot, a bag of busted open bird seed, that through whatever means he had it in a bag, but it had gotten torn open. And when he started digging around, rummaging through the corner of his storage area there, and found this bird seed and had all kinds of little pests in there. So he had to clean it up and things like that. But something he wouldn't have necessarily known. He fortunately knew what to look for when he saw the little pests he was seeing in his house, in his space. He knew that, okay, this is a stored product thing. I know I got to find the source. But again, it can happen to anybody, right? I always tell everybody, insects don't care how much money you have. They don't care how fancy your house is. They just need the basic food, water, shelter, and that's all they want. They don't care what church you go to or what school you attended or where you work. They just need a source. They just need those three things to set up camp. Holes in the wall. This is under a sink in a bathroom. So you've got an obvious cavity there. That's an excellent entry and exit point. Maybe not for them to come in and out of your house, but to get in between your walls, to find a safe place to get away from you whenever you are cleaning, whenever you are touching up, or even maybe you are doing a little treatment. You've noticed you've got a pest problem and you want to, that's a great refuge for them to go. We're not going in there. We're not spraying stuff or sprinkling stuff or whatnot. And who knows what's in those walls. Just more insects would be what I would guess. And other things. That's plenty of gaps. So that's always recommended to seal that stuff off. There's all kind of metal and putty closures and things like that to help seal those openings off like that. Inside, I've seen outside of people's houses that'll have holes like that. Absolutely want to seal that off before stuff gets in there. The example on the right could easily have been one of my kids' rooms back in the day, but that is not. That's just a great example of clutter. So we got a gym bag full of clothes. We got clothes everywhere, basically. There's a hamper full of stuff. Any of this stuff, and again, depending on how often this gets cleaned up or how often this gets touched or moved around, again, a great harbor for populations to build up of pests. Now, maybe not your pantry pest, but maybe roaches. I see this, if there's a pet in the house, could be a harbor for where fleas may go. Find a dark area out of the way, especially if you've got years ago, when we had a cat living in our house and it loved to hang out in the kids' closet. I have no idea why, but found out, months into it, the cat quit going in there. And I thought maybe it made a mess of something. But no, there was actually a flea population that had built up in that closet. And cat was on flea medications and things like that. But my kids said they started seeing fleas on themselves. They were getting bit. And lo and behold, they open up their closet space, go in there for the first time in however many months since I've been in there, and it's a wreck. It looks like this. And yeah, had to go in there and clean that out, shampooing carpets, vacuuming, all that stuff over and over again to get all that pest population out of there. So again, just an example of, again, if stuff stays stagnant and doesn't get touched and doesn't get moved and builds up and clutter builds up, great harbor for pests to go into. I'm not sure what part of the house this would be. Maybe it's just like a den or study area kind of thing, or maybe it's next to the kitchen. But again, I can see multiple problems where stored pests would get in here and cause an issue. We've got the white bags down in the kind of the center at the bottom is some brand of rice. So they bought in bulk. They got all this rice, these 20 pound, 25 pound, 50 pound bag, whatever of rice. Uh, that's a fantastic food source for a lot of our stored product pests. It's a grain. So any of those things like that. I don't know what that big bucket is, but it's got a pot lid on it. And then we've got our empty soda cans and soda bottles up there and open plastic bags. I mean, great that you're recycling, but that's a sugar source, a food source for pests. There's an open bottle of syrup sitting on the table over here. Cake mixes, cereal boxes, and then over on the far left, I noticed there's live plants as well. So again, all kinds of host sources to where an insect pest could set up camp. So a lot going on there. It's probably not in the typical home, but not hard to figure out. Like the issue would be which one of these things, or maybe yes, all these things, but which one of these, if we've got a pest that we've noticed that's building up in population, and we've realized we've got to, where's it coming from in here? So just another prime example of kind of not hoarding up a lot of large inventory of stuff to just invite rodents or insect pests as well. So now we'll jump into the common ones that we see. This one is probably, at least for me, anytime I've had product pest issues, this guy always seems to be involved in some way. It comes out a lot of times with a lot of the rotation issues. So if we've got an expired product that's been on the shelf, that cake mix again, that container of oats. I'm on a big kick now. I'm doing the overnight oat things. When I eat them fast enough, I go through oats quick enough now that I don't have a rotation issue. But I'm certainly not buying, a 12 pack of them, just for the sheer fact of knowing that they can show up in this kind of stuff. So usually the first sign we see is we open a container and we see this webbing. There's all kind. Hopefully you wouldn't see all the little worms and moths and things too, but that webbing is essentially silk that the larva will be spinning. They'll make their cocoons and things out of it, whatnot. But you may very well open that lid. It's just a cardboard lid, right? So they don't seal super well. And again, these insects are real small. They can lay eggs on the outside of those surfaces. The adults that can fly around, since they're moths, can sense that. I just now noticed there's a couple little black flecks over here on the right. Those are actually beetles. So we've got a couple different species hanging out in this container as well. Here's the bag of cake mix. Again, it wasn't, this particular one didn't have any holes, wasn't torn or open or anything, but we can see kind of the mess of that the insects are leaving there on the underside, as well as the larva. There's actually a larva there itself trying to get into that bag. It's sealed bag, but they can eat through that. Certain species of insects, they have the jaws capable to eat through that paper or that wax coating, or even eat through plastic or foil as well. It's pretty wild. Doesn't mean they're digesting it, but they can chew through it for sure. The bottom basket here was flipped over. It had been purchased that had fruit. I can't remember if it was fruit or vegetables, but they had bought it, and when the fruit was all gone, or whatever, they kind of reused it over and over. But it actually we found these cases. These are most of these are empty, but these are pupal cases for the larvae, these India meal moths. So after they've eaten and whatnot, they'll spin their little silk cocoon and then they'll hatch out into moths. But they noticed they had a moth issue. Kind of looking through the house, and as they were cleaning off stuff and cleaning surfaces, and flip this over, not even intending to look at it underneath, but boom, there's your source. So it's hanging out under this thing that sits on their counter all the time, and constantly has a fresh source of stuff in it, vegetables or fruits or who knows what, sitting in it as well. So just something to be vigilant with again, and pay attention to some of the sanitary parts of that. Flies, very common. Of course, these can end up in our house. I always kind of say they just kind of magically show up. They always seem to buzz in when I don't notice it, like whether they come in the front door or hitchhiking something else. But flies, they have a short lifespan, but they are able to rapidly reproduce. So if you happen to have a fertile female or whatnot that's in the prime of laying eggs and things, they can lay a lot of eggs in a hurry. But they love dead or decaying stuff. rotten stuff, the stinky smells, trash cans a lot. You know, how many people have trash cans that close and seal real tight anyway. I've got one that's an auto, one of the little automatic ones that senses you when you're close. But still, though, that thing can open and it's not so tightly sealed that something like this couldn't get in there. So the idea being it's usually not an issue because you change your trash and things that much, but that can be a lure into there to kind of attract them, and then from there they can move out and find things. And obviously, we know flies are very mobile, can fly really fast, hard to catch, all that kind of thing. So usually we have to put out some kind of baits or lures or fly traps or something to try to catch them then. And there's all kinds of different techniques and light traps and all kinds of stuff that people recommend out there. And the different species don't necessarily have different attractants. Again, at the end of the day, they're all going to be attracted to anything that's going to decay or have a real strong odor for sure. But trash is usually the easy way that they find their way in. But again, they're adults, so they're mobile. Here's a pile of eggs. Now, I'm not sure this isn't my photos. I'm not sure this exact scenario of where they're at. Looks like they might be outdoors somewhere. But they don't lay eggs on, random stuff. They're going to lay eggs on a food source. So whatever this is, or whatever it's near or adjacent to, is something that they would want their young to eat. But all that little pile there, those are all fly eggs. And all those are going to hatch out into those little larvae that we see up there. The little, maggots is their common name, but that's their fly larvae. They got two little black spots. It's their little eye spots, so they can kind of see which way is up and tell between light and dark and whatnot. So they're mobile a little bit, but for the most part, they're going to stay close to home until they mature into adult flies and then fly off and kind of start the process over. So want to avoid that. If flies can build up very quickly is really the takeaway there. Drugstore beetles, this is a culprit that can get misidentified, but a lot of times, again, you can kind of tell by the picture, it's so small. They're really kind of hard to see, but they can do a lot of damage. They have kind of a wide diet. They'll eat anything like grains, cereal, flour, pet food, spices, even if you've got old spice containers. That, I don't know how often people buy all their cumins and parsleys and whatever, if you go and buy your McCormick's and all that kind of stuff, you get the big container. Well, if you don't use that stuff often, that can be a harbor for things like this to show up. Now, there's small containers, but there are big containers of that stuff. So can certainly host a large population. But they'll feed on a wide variety of stuff. Also known to consume a lot of animal-based things. So even things that are made out of wool, they'll consume that wool fiber, natural fiber like that, hair, leathers, and even this is one of those that it's a domestic beetle, basically. It's in that family, so they can destroy museum specimens. I've got insect collections and things like that, but I have little scent cubes inside those cases to where they can get through the seals that are on those cases. Or even if by happenstance I happen to have one open, if I'm modifying or updating something, if I leave it open long enough and I just so happen to have a beetle come through, one beetle can come in and they'll eat those dried insect specimens that I've got. But they can do that, had a fellow that had a deer head and they were eating the fur and the hide off of the deer head that was hanging on his wall. So a wide array of stuff that they can deal with. Again, small pest usually goes unnoticed until there's a lot of them. You may see them flying around, whatever, but you may be like, what is this thing crawling on the wall? Or what is this little tiny brown fleck on the window seal kind of thing, whatever. And it's usually this guy or a family of those. Here's some dried chili peppers. Drugstore beetles, we're chewing on those, munching on those. Insects don't really taste. They can taste, but they don't taste the heat from peppers like that. So, it doesn't matter if it's a jalapeno or a ghost pepper or whatever. Again, that capsaicin is in there. But they can destroy and damage these stored herbs and stored peppers and things like that we're trying to preserve. So you always want to keep an eye on that, keep those properly stored and sealed in a way. Pet treats is an old milk bone. Looks like half of it got eaten and the other half, who knows? Maybe it fell into the couch. Maybe it went under something, under a chair, under something. And as we're cleaning out, we find this and then we see all these little kind of shotgun holes in it. Those are drugstore beetles that are feeding on that. They're eating the grains and eating that food source. And to have that many on there, there's probably a little population that's built up around there too. So I recently got another puppy. I think he's almost 9 months old now. But he absolutely leaves scraps everywhere. So I try to be as vigilant as I can, sweeping up after him and whatnot. But yeah, so that it's a very easy source of food for a lot of pests to build up as well that we may not think of. Sawtooth grain beetles, this is going to be kind of like their name implies. They love grains. So this is a real close up here's oatmeal again, oat container, where all these little brown fella, I got some of them circled there, but they're also over here on that little smaller square. They're in flour as well. So they grains in general. They love this real small thing, maybe smaller than a grain of rice, honestly. Very flat, so they can get into containers easy enough. So you always want to make sure stuff seals correctly and seals tightly. But they can end up in crevices and cracks of places too. So if stuff spills down, never fails, but between the countertop and the refrigerator, or maybe if your stove is built into your countertop like that, all those little cracks and crevices where food and things like that can fall down into, you want to clean that stuff out because a lot of times you may have little harbors of things like this hiding back there, feeding off that stuff, building up in numbers. So you want to make sure you get into all those little kind of hidden places as well. And this is one of those that is a long-lived species, can live for years as an adult and constantly laying eggs. They don't reproduce super fast, but they can build up if they go unchecked and kind of untreated. Rice weevils, I don't see these a lot. I probably just because I don't bulk store a lot of rice, but I guarantee that one picture we saw that had 10 bags of 50-pound bags of rice in the corner, they're probably going to have rice weevils. They're also maize weevils, so they will do that with corn as well. So may see that more commonly if folks that are buying bulk amounts of whether it's deer corn or things like that, or like the little corn cobs for their squirrel feeders or whatever folks are doing. May see instances like that. Again, easy pest to get rid of. Most of these we're talking about, you remove the food source and the pest is gone because they're not straying real far away from a food source. So if you find them in a food source, get rid of the food source. Don't try to pick them out. You're never going to get them all, anything like that. But pet foods or bird seeds or whatever, bag it up, get rid of it. You're taking the pest and that kind of nesting site away from them as well. Just a closer up look. Don't really need to go into the super specifics of how to identify them, but they will feed on dry beans as well. But rice and corn are probably their preferred meals as well. But anything like that, they can eat. They can also feed on flour and things like that as well. But they prefer some of these. We'll notice that they'll like whole grains or whole kernels, I should say, and some of them prefer a more processed when it's ground down into like a more like grits or a finer milling. Some of these pests prefer that over a whole grain as well. Flower beetles, kind of a big catch-all niche. These are the little guys that we saw at that pizzeria I talked about with flour. This is what we'd see. You'd see the little trails, and you knew they were in there, and eventually you'd see them. They don't move fast, but you'd see the little flecks kind of crawling around in it, and have to clean all that out there. But they can eat not just flour, but they can also eat processed stuff as well, even if it's been shaped into something or whatever. It says the red flower beetle is most common. I have it. Sure. The point is, there's a beetle in there eating my stored product. I'm getting rid of it. So generally, any presence of that is too much. That's usually my threshold for that. But yes, so they do prefer more powdered or more milled things. Warehouse beetles, these get confused a lot with carpet beetles. They're similar species, but they're different as far as what they feed on. Warehouse beetles, another kind of generalist thing that can chew through all kinds of different packaging, cardboard packages. I go back and think of the Betty Crocker cake mix boxes again. If you find holes in that packaging, odds are it's probably something along this line that's doing it. So the larva is there. That's their image. They're little fuzzy, tiny little brown or cream colored larvae, really fuzzy. And they're typically, again, you'll find them inside those stored products like that. But they can't eat through the packaging. They can't eat through the plastic. They can get inside those boxes. Here's another image inside of an unopened box of cake mix. So there's the holes up here in the top right. They ate their way into the box, found their way inside the plastic bag, and kind of set up shop. So all this mesh you see here in the middle in the main picture, that's all shed skins. That's their waste. There's some actual living larvae crawling around on there. You got adult beetles on it. So we've got a whole life cycle, whole micro environment inside this little box. And I guarantee if they're in this box, they're probably in other boxes as well. But this was a cake mix box. There's also um, oh, I'm sorry, this one actually I think it might have been a pasta box. But their cake mix box is very common. Beans, boxes of hamburger helpers, whatever. They can eat through all that stuff and set up camp in there. But this is a pretty big infestation if it gets to this level. But another importance of rotating through your shelf stable stuff. Um, Shows the difference between carpet beetles and warehouse beetles. And the biggest difference is carpet beetles, they also can be in your house. The last place I was at, I fought these guys like crazy. Where they'll actually eat the natural fibers that can be in the carpet. They'll eat the wool, silk, fur. They'll also eat upholstered furniture, and then of course dried food items as well. So they can be a pantry pest, but more often than not, these are the things. If you see little things crawling up your walls that look like that have that kind of look to them, where they look like these little brown fuzzy things. You may even see the adults. They're kind of a mottled appearance, but if you see those, either you usually don't see them in your carpet, but usually they climb up vertical surfaces to pupate. So they'll climb up the walls and then build their little cocoons, and they'll be stuck to the wall. They'll go up the crevices or where the walls meet. Even you can find them in there. You just vacuum them up, wipe them off, things like that. They're easy to get rid of, but if you have a lot of them, it may be something where you may actually need to steam clean the carpets and things like that. We'll get rid of a lot of that kind of stuff. Cowpea weevils or chickpea weevils. I haven't seen a lot of these, but they're known to. They're one of those. They can actually exist inside dried legumes, so dried peas, dried beans, things like that. They can actually be present when they're harvested from the plant when they're dry. If there's if a treatment wasn't done well enough before harvesting, or even if you're harvesting stuff like this, in your own backyard and drying the beans out to use like this is a pest that can show up in that case because they'll actually live inside the actual kernel or actual seed, that bean, and then will bore their way out, leave these little circular holes when they hatch out into adults, and the little white spots are eggs that they can lay. So just another thing to look out for there. If you start seeing holes and stuff, usually I see these kinds of things pop out on those arts and craft projects. They'll pop out of the little beans and be like, "Huh, why has this got holes in it?" Oh, here we go. Here's a good image. This was an ornament that somebody's grandkid had made for him, and you see all the little holes all over it there. And so these beans, these dried beans, before they were made into this little art project, already had those pests inside. And they could certainly be introduced after the fact as well. But a lot of times when we see those round holes, it's typically when they're emerging. They eat at round circles so they can crawl out. So they were already there before this was made. Pretty wild stuff for sure. So big takeaway is clean up any spills. Sweeping is important, vacuuming important as well. I like to use the little pressurized air canisters to clean out a lot of the cracks and crevices and things like that into places I can't maybe easily reach a broom or something like that. Now you want to be careful you're not blasting more stuff back in there where it gets even harder to get, but to kind of get that stuff out to where it can be swept up or vacuumed up or wiped up, with cleaners and things like that. But sanitation is pretty key on controlling a lot of these pests for sure. Don't need a lot of mess to create an introductory problem for sure. You can also freeze things. So if you're worried about, well, I don't know if there's anything in here or not, you can put things in deep freezers. You can do bird seed that way. You can do other items that way before it goes to be stored. Before it gets put away, you can freeze things, bag things up, just to kind of monitor and see and kind of offer a little bit of prevention to kind of avoid maybe having something surprise you the next time you open it up. Again, discard anything that you're seeing any kind of damage to, or you might even suspect that it may have some. Again, birdseed, rat bait, pet food. There you go. There's a big three right there of ones that a lot of folks will have that can be harbors for sure. Proper storage. I think I said it enough, but there's all kinds of different storage solutions out there. At a bare minimum, plastic containers with the little plastic lids. The glass containers are great. Just make sure all those seals are in good condition, that things seal tightly. Again, you can put a lid on it, but if it's still got a corner that pops up, or again, I've just got rid of some old containers the other day, just because the lids didn't fit quite right enough. They were just old. I'd had them for a while, so I got rid of them and got some new stuff. But And we've used containers like that for cereal and rice and other grains and things as well. Not only does it, I guess some people care about it, look visually appealing, but it offers a real tight seal as well to keep that stuff out of there. So, and again, older items, don't let stuff sit unused forever and ever. Yeah, someday maybe I'll get to the bottom of this bag of rice or the bottom of this box of whatever mix. But stick to those that rotation schedule. And if you buy new stuff, get rid of the old stuff. It's just better to be safe than sorry. That those dark conditions, humid conditions, undisturbed, out of sight conditions, perfect. Again, can't say it enough for pests to build up in those. So there's some other solutions. I've definitely used the metal trash can to store bird seed, pet food, things like that. The giant Tupperware containers. That's kind of where I'm at now. These big Rubbermaid containers and things where you've got a lot of our holiday stuff is stored in those totes. But now they're not perfectly sealed, but I also don't have any. Most of the stuff I've got is synthetic stuff. There's no like animal products or a whole big mess of, I don't have a lot of, arrangements that have pine cones and wood and leaves and things like that in there either. All that can be a harborage for stuff. And then I threw up these neat little things. That's pretty wild stuff. Obviously, it's an older picture, so it's not a new technology at all, but just another contraption to keep something stored, to have it where it's shut off. No easy entry points to that. For pests, thicker containers that they can't chew through, stuff like that. And then there's once we have them, or once we're even trying to prevent them, but what do we do? How do we get rid of them? How do we monitor to know if we even have this kind of problem? There are pheromones. Now, I always tell folks there are pheromone traps, pheromone lures that you can put out, but they only catch males. And the females are the ones laying eggs and kind of multiplying the population. Excuse me. But the traps that you can still put out pheromone traps to kind of monitor. They use this a lot with moths. Even that one on the right, that's pantry moth trap. So it's a Indian meal moth or flower moth trap. So if you're starting to catch stuff in there, it tells you that they're there. There's only males in there, so you're not really stopping the problem, but it's letting you know that, hey, there's something in this trap that I put up. So that tells me I need to dig deeper. So you don't stop at the monitor or the trap. It just tells you need to act because you've caught stuff now. Fly traps work great. The fly paper, it's not super scientific, but if you've got a fly problem, a lot of times you can hide that stuff out of the way or set it in corners where you may see a lot of activity, and that's a easy solution. My only thing is they can be messy. Obviously, they stick to stuff, so you can get it all over yourself. If you've got cats, years ago I had a cat that was obsessed with these things. No matter where I hung it, it always ended up getting stuck to it. So you just some different considerations. You got to find something that works for your needs, your environment as well. But here's an opened up one of those lure traps. That little red square in the middle. Sometimes it may look like a pencil eraser, but this one was a little red square, and it's just impregnated with a sex pheromone that attracts those males. And so once those males show up, if I see this many, I know I've got a large population in there. If I got one or two, I know it's not as serious, but they're still there, so I want to make sure I'm treating them. And the males show up because there's females. So there are females there, especially with that many males around. There are females in there laying eggs and breeding and starting infestations. So you want to make sure you're staying on top of that as well. But just knowing that this doesn't end your problem, this just lets you know that there's one there. This is one down here on the bottom right is more for like codling moths. So the ones that go in and eat clothing, your clothing moths and things like that. It's about that same size. You got the larva, the adult, and then here's that pheromone trap. There's almost like a little vial that this one came with that they put in there. And they've got a lot of male moths in there, so there's a lot of females in there somewhere as well. But knowing that you need to get that out, clean that area out, and de-infest it as well. But again, the biggest takeaway: traps don't cure your problem. They just let you know that there is one. So it's just a helpful monitoring tool. Some solutions to some of these problems. There are sprays and dust products as well. I'm not a big fan of using dusts in the house. Again, the little plumes, little clouds of stuff that you breathe in, your pets breathe in. But sprays, there's several sprays. The plus side is a lot of indoor products are going to be a very low dose, so it's not like you're really laying it to your indoor area. And a lot of these they talk about there's a little ant and roach one down there. A lot of those are made to be contact sprays, so they're going to kill that little line of ants, or maybe those roaches you saw, or whatever little bug you saw, it'll kill it. But is it going to solve the problem? The ultimate thing is they're there because there's a source of food. So at the end of the day, we have got to find that source. We can spray until we turn purple, until we run out of stuff to spray. But there's a food source, moisture source, food source. Something is there that is continuing this saga of infestation. So we've got to find that. But these products can help buy us some time. Baits is what I really recommend for any indoor pest, especially with ants and roaches. Those are probably the most common ones that we get calls about. And so I love these little gel baits. There's different ones, like this one's a little tray, basically that little taro liquid bait. You tear off the end of it and you set it down like a little roach motel. And the ants will go in there and access that. It's a bait, they're attracted to it. Biggest thing is they eat the bait, they take it back to the colony, to the queen, and it kills the colony. That's the best way to do it. So yeah, you could spray the little pests you're seeing right there on the floor, but there's just going to be more of them. There's thousands more, right? Same thing with the roaches. You can spray that one, but you really want to get all of them. So baits are a fantastic way. They're kind of slow acting. Usually within 24 hours, they've killed whatever host initially ate it or pest initially ate it. But they've also more than likely shared that with the other parts of their colony. They've shared it in cases of roaches. They don't set up big hives or big colonies, but they're social. So they'll share food with each other. And so it's a good way for these chemicals, these ingredients to get around and actually kill these pests that we're getting at without spraying your whole house down and worrying about your pets getting into it or kids getting into it. Baits work well. Can't say it enough. So in summary, really, most of these pests are going to be secretive. They're going to feed in hidden areas we're not going to be looking in and not really going to be fiddling in a whole lot, in boxes and things like that. I always try to tell folks, think outside the pantry as well. Look in the attic, look in the basement, look in the garage. Those are great ways for things to find their way into our living space. So they may live happily up in the attic, and then that 1 or 2 times a year we go up there and grab that box of stuff as we're changing out for seasons or decorating whatever, and now we've brought this into the house. So always be vigilant with that. I will throw that in there. I didn't put that in here too, but it's pretty much widely accepted now that we don't use mothballs. There's no really any such thing as a safe mothball product. They're pretty potent. The naphthalene mothballs for sure. They're real pungent, real stinky. We all kind of know what that smells like. Those vapors can harm us too and harm pets and things as well. So they're not banned or taken off the market or anything, but it's very much not recommended to use those because it's a non-target thing, and especially if you use them in a space where you can also smell those vapors, it also messes with you. So don't use mothballs. There's many other alternatives out there. But the numbers can build up if we let them sit and leave them undisturbed. So we just want to be vigilant and inspect areas, light sources, things like that. But that's it, guys. That's pretty much the gist of it there. I'll be happy to take any questions that you may have if there's specific pests you're dealing with or any questions about anything I went over, if we need to look at another slide or something like that. But with that, lay it on me if anybody's got any questions.
Thank you so much, Philip. While I have the recording still going, I wanted to throw a couple to you. I did have a question about UV sterilization. So using light to sterilize, is that an option here? I know we talk about that with bacterial and well water, but I'm not sure about pantry pests. So what do you think on that topic?
Right, and I'm not super familiar with how effective that would be. It's not on my radar as far as recommending different products of get a UV light and do a couple once overs on your pantry goods and you're good to go. I've never heard that. I know there was some, at least back in the restaurant world again, where we'd had different lights and things, and most of any kind of light source is more likely it's going to be used as kind of a deterrent or repellent. As far as sanitizing that, I wouldn't feel super comfortable promising that. There's just different species of stuff. I couldn't say that it would destroy the eggs, or I don't even think it would necessarily harm the adults or the larvae either. So I think really the prevention is going to be the biggest thing. Is again finding the source, preventing the source, using the sealed containers, all that kind of stuff is definitely the biggest recommendation we can make. And then if you do have an infestation again, kind of identifying what we're working with so we know if we need to use baits or harsher treatment, really. But yeah, I wish I knew. That'd be great if the UV stuff would work. But I've never seen any research that would say, oh yeah, that would be great. But yeah, like you're talking about on a microbe level and stuff for sure. So it'd probably help maybe on like a bacterium, but you talking about some other pathogens maybe that might be, but because I didn't even touch on that. If they're foodborne stuff, there could be some use along that line. But insect wise, I wouldn't think that it'd be super effective.
Thank you. And I can follow up on that too with some of our specialists to see if they have further information, and I can try to include that with the recording.
Right, right.
I think those are the only ones. Most of the other questions you answered while we're going, but I
Okay,
just so appreciate you.
awesome. Anytime. I love it.